I've got it apparently. Right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first Shetland Geological Society talk of 2024, and Happy New Year to you all. We're going to be treated this evening by James Cresswell. James is the director and founder of GeoWorld Travel, and he personally leads most of the travel trips that they organise. He studied geology at Bristol University and has an undergraduate degree, of course, and then studied oceanography at the University of Southampton. So he's well imbued with academic qualifications. Before setting up his company, his career, or reading it, it's rather like his life, sounded as though he travelled and didn't stop traveling from about the age of 16, apparently, and has visited at least 100 countries during his time so far. I'm sure there are places that he has yet to visit, but he keeps moving. He developed a passion for communicating geoscience when he got involved with some television documentaries. He worked on geological series for the Discovery Channel, as well as working on the BBC's Blue Planet series, which must have been rather interesting and exciting. I'll hand over to James now. He's going to take us on a walk around Iceland. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Stephen, and Happy New Year to you as well. So I'll share my screen and let's just do that. Okay, so it's going to be a geological journey around Iceland, and it is based around the tour that I actually lead. So, but I try not to make it too much just of an advert of my tour, but it is what the talk is based around. So, yeah, we're going to go around Iceland. Describing the sites that we go and see and telling you a lot about the geology of Iceland along the way. So, here's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be going around Iceland in an anti-clockwise loop, starting at the airport in Keflavik, around the Golden Circle, at the Westman Islands, right here around the east, into Askja volcano, back through Akureyri and back. So in a loop like that. Before I start the journey, I just tell you something sort of general about the geology of Iceland. And Iceland is actually a really extraordinary place in the fact that it is both on a mid-ocean ridge, the North Atlantic ridge, and it's also thought to be underneath a geological hotspot. So you've got upwelling from an enormously hot material from deep in the mantle upwelling, and it's thought that you've got those two exactly overlying each other. The hotspot is coming up exactly where the mid-ocean ridge is and pushing Iceland above the surface. This hotspot was because hotspots are stationary, as you know, probably. And when the plate moved across the hotspot, it actually left a trail of evidence where the hotspot was. So first of all, erupting out in East Greenland, and then Greenland moved across it, and the hotspot came. The track of the hotspot came over to West Greenland, and then as the continent Greenland moved away from the hotspot. The North Atlantic that was beginning to open, that spreading ridge got stuck onto the hotspot. And it pushed Iceland above the surface. And as Iceland is sort of the plate and the spreading ridge together are sort of moving to the west, trying to move off the hotspot. The spreading ridge keeps jumping to the east, and this is a general diagram of a hotspot, and this is geological time showing the hotspot in its position and the Atlantic opening. So that's the sort of traditional idea of what Iceland is. But a new paper published a couple of years ago, some of you may have seen in national press, actually proposed that perhaps there's actually something rather different happened, and when the North Atlantic started splitting, the ocean started spreading to the north of Iceland and to the south of Iceland, but in the area where Iceland actually is, the ocean didn't break apart, and actually there's still continental crust there, and it's proposed there could be a lost continent called Icelandia, which is now mostly submerged under the ocean. But this is just a theory. There is not a huge amount of evidence to confirm that yet, apart from the crust under Iceland is much thicker than you would expect. It's actually 25 kilometers thick, rather than the sort of normal 4 kilometers thick for oceanic crust. But this is yeah, that's an idea that was in the news. And the reason why that idea might even have any currency at all is it has actually been shown in other parts of the world, such as around New Zealand, and also the Seychelles. Indeed, there are areas where is continental crust that is now submerged, and is the remnants of ancient continental bodies. So that's an interesting idea. But anyway, nevertheless, how Iceland came into being, what we do know is the plate boundary separating the North American plate on one side and Eurasian plate on the other goes right through the island of Iceland. And as the plate boundary comes through, it actually splits into two different spreading areas, but then converges again to leave the island to the north. And in actual fact, what has happened is the spreading ridges actually migrate as the plate has sort of been trying to move off the hotspot. Initially, this was a spreading ridge in the Reykjanes Peninsula. It's now extinct. This spreading ridge is active. This spreading ridge is active, and it's thought this is becoming a new spreading ridge, and the spreading ridges are actually moving to the east. So, yeah, this is just that sort of diagram of spreading ridges jumping as the spreading ridge is moving over the hotspot. But what would happen is a spreading ridge stays in one place for a period of time, and as it does so, the rift stays in one time. A lot of lava erupts out, and you get a big thickness of lava with actually bends the crust. So you actually have the lava layers on Iceland are folded. Because you would have a big thickness depressing the lava, whereas the spreading ridge is active, and then it's still quite thick where an inactive one was. So all the layers are slightly folded. Another thing to tell you about Iceland, as a generality, it has a huge number of volcanoes, and these are concentrated in 30 different volcanic systems. And a volcanic system typically has a main volcano at one end of it, but then stretching away from the volcano, you have sort of an elongated area with dikes and fissure eruptions stretching away from it. So, for example, the Askja volcano, which is 21 on this list, its volcanic system is actually 200 kilometers stretching away from it. So all these different volcanic systems that normally have a central volcano and fissure swarms stretching away from them. And so anyway, so we're on to a tour. So on the very first day of a tour, we fly into the Reykjanes Global Geopark. So like Shetland, this area of Iceland is a global geopark, and it's actually where the main Keflavik airport is. Here's the Keflavik airport, and the city of Reykjavik is some 70 kilometers away here. So we fly into the airport, and we don't move straight onto the city. We spend the first morning of the tour in the Reykjanes Geopark area because there's an awful lot to see. You have the Mid-Atlantic ridge coming onto the land, and also you've got these new eruptions that have been erupting over the last 2 or 3 years. You have them to see here as well. So there's a lot to see on that first morning. So the very first stop I like to take people to is this site called the Bridge over the Continents. And what the idea is this bridge is going from the North American continent to the Eurasian continent. In fact, it's not doing that. It's actually spanning an extension fracture. And what you actually have, you have what the plate boundary is, you have a graben. So you have a normal fault either side of the graben, and the center portion drops down as the plates are pulling apart. And in the floor of this graben, you can get extensional fractures, which are also pulling apart. So this bridge is actually expanding a extensional fracture in no man's land. But here is a Google Earth image of the bridge, but just very close to it, just where I'm pointing on the line here, actually is the normal fault. That's the western boundary of the Graben. So actually, this is North America here, and this is the sort of no man's land or microplate, if you like, in between the two normal faults. And then we move on to the other side of that. We come down, this is the other side of it here. So this is the Eurasian plate, and we stop, climb up onto this hill here, and we can observe truly the point where the mid-ocean ridge is joining the land. And from this hill here, I'm looking at the other side of a normal fault. And if you turn around and look inland, you can see there's a lighthouse there that was initially actually where I was standing taking the photo, but it was moved inland, and you can see Iceland stretching away behind you. There's also, in that previous photo, there's a steaming area here, and that's a geothermal area, one of the largest mud pots in Iceland. We visit that. And then what has occurred in the last few years is this large, with this eruption very close to this area. So I've been going to Iceland for about the last 11 years, and the first 8 times or so this didn't exist. So of course I have to stop there now. And in 2021, the Fagradalsfjall volcano started erupting. Now, one thing I must just say is a lot of these Icelandic place names I don't know how to pronounce. I've never actually heard someone say them. I've only read them in books, and I'm a bit dyslexic anyway, so I apologize for saying them wrong. And some of you Shetlanders with Viking ancestry might have a better idea how to pronounce them than me. I'm not sure. But anyway, so sorry for pronouncing things wrong, but it started erupting in December 2019. And you had, let's just move that. It started erupting in December 2019, and it was the first eruption on the Reykjanes Peninsula for 800 years. And this volcano, the Fagradalsfjall volcano, had been dormant for 6,000 years. And the first eruption started with a 600 to 700 meter long fissure. And then during that first month, about 6 different fissures all opened up, and they're numbered here. And then but by the 2nd of May, it all collected to just one fissure at number 5, and a volcano started to grow. And that volcano became 334 meters high, with fire fountains up to 460 meters high. And then it just continuously erupted from that volcano right the way up until the 2nd of September, when the eruptions from the volcano stopped. But lava continued to flow for just over another 2 weeks, seeping out from other areas, and then the eruption finished. And here are some pictures on the actual day the eruption ended, is when I visited there. And actually, this photograph I took here, and I brought my group there, that's probably the last time that the lava actually erupted in the volcano, just by chance. I took that picture and it didn't erupt again, and actually that was the last day it erupted. But we were so lucky to be there and be able to be right close to a lava, and it was just an incredible experience. So that's the first eruption that occurred. And then in 2022, the volcano started erupting again, but this time from a new fissure further to the north. Between July the 30th and August the 3rd, there were 10,000 earthquakes. And then on the 3rd of August, a 360 meter long fissure opened, and actually 1,800 people, 130 people visited the site on the very first day. And these actually aren't roads, these are footpaths that have been built since the eruptions started, so you can actually walk around. And then this is a much shorter lived eruption. It finished on the 21st of August. But yeah, by the 10th of August, it was just coming out from one fissure. The 10th and 13th of August had its biggest fire fountains, but then it weakened and it completely stopped. But I turned up there just 11 days after it stopped. So I actually initially walked up here and saw it from here. And then the following day, our tour started, and I took our group climbing up here to a point here where you could see the 2021 cone, but you could also see the 2022 cone in the same view. So this is the view looking at the 2021 lavas, and then looking north, this is the main volcano from 2021, and this is the volcano from 2022, and here is our group. there looking at the scenery, but it's all quite windy. But then the volcano erupted again early in midsummer in it's summer of 2023, and it started erupting a bit further to the north. So this is the 2021 and 2022 eruptions, and this is 2023. On the 4th of July, there were 12,000 earthquakes. And then on the 10th of July, after a big earthquake, the lava broke through. It was initially a much stronger eruption, maybe 10 times more lava flow than the other two, with multiple fissures stretching over a kilometer-long stretch. But then it quickly reduced into one fissure, one single active cone, and then it stopped quite quickly on the 5th of August. So here are some pictures, not my own pictures, but here's some pictures on the internet of those three eruptions, the 2021 eruption, the 2022 eruption, and the June 2023 eruption. And then speaking of 2023, another eruption has occurred in the area. And the area which I was just talking about is just going off the side of the map here. But on the 18th of December until the 22nd of December, but it's not declared finished yet. So just before Christmas, these fissures all opened up here near the town of Grindavik. So on the 24th of October, an intense swarm of, this is written eruption, intense swarm of earthquakes began. And then by the 10th of November, 20,000 different earthquakes had occurred, and the land had risen 10 centimeters. The town of Grindavik got evacuated. Then the land dropped down another 35 centimeters, but to come up another 30 centimeters by the 8th of December. And on the evening of the 18th, it all split open and started to erupt. And on the 22nd, it's paused. Well, we don't know if it's paused or stopped. It's too early to say the eruption stopped. But so officially, this eruption is still ongoing, but no lava has come out since the 22nd of December. So, and this is somebody's got their speaker on, I think, just saying. So, but anyway, on this is just a map of the volcanic hazards map I found on the internet, but this shows the extent of the lava on the 21st of December. So you can see here. So that's how big it got. So, so that's what we'll do on that first morning. So you see the ridge coming out of the sea, and we'll go and see one of those new eruptions, see the new lava, and then we leave that area and we travel by the city of Reykjavik to come to what's known as the Golden Triangle. And you've got the Thingvellir World Heritage Site, Giza and Gitfoss waterfall. So yeah, the road passes through several different volcanic eruptions, and I talk about these eruptions, the different times they came out. We skirt the city and we head up to Thingvellir, which is a national park, and it's also a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And what we actually do is we walk down here, we walk down a normal fault, which is rather like the bridge across the continents, and you come down into a graben. And often you see this image incorrectly labeled on the internet saying it's the boundary between the two plates. It's not. It's in fact, it's North America here, and then this is the bottom of the graben, the sort of the microplate on no man's land in between the two main plates. But anyway, we come down, and it's the best place anywhere on the planet to understand the processes of the pulling apart of the plates. This Al-Magja fissure is up to 60 meters wide and has a vertical displacement of 40 meters. So the land has dropped down 40 meters, and the two plates are pulling apart at 0.6 centimeters a year. In the background of this photo, you can see a volcano, which I'm circling there, and that's actually number 4 on the map. That's the Hengil volcano, but we're about here on the map. So it's part of the Hengil volcanic system, whereas the recent eruptions we were talking about earlier, they're in number 1, part of the Reykjanes volcanic system. So the last eruption, so the last big, and one thing to tell you about when the plates are pulling apart, even though the spreading rate is 0.6 centimeters a year, it's not like a gradual thing. It sort of stays still, nothing happens, then there's an earthquake and you have a sudden movement. And then still, then there's an earthquake and there's a sudden movement. So averaging out over time. And the last major earthquake occurred in 1780, causing a sudden 1 meter subsidence. And it also caused the Parliament to be moved. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. So yeah, you've got this lovely pahoe ropey texture of lava to be seen there. this flowing lava is very hot, 1,200 degrees, and the sort of blocky lava you see in other places, that's a cooler temperature. As you walk down the fracture, you see many lava layers, some of them each representing a different lava flow, and some of them are between 0.5 and 2 meters thick. And the flows are thought to be about 10,000 years old, and they've started to fill up the graben. So here is an image from above. This is the Al Manya fissure that we walked down. You can come onto the floor of the graben, and in the floor of the graben there are these extension fractures pulling apart, rather like that bridge across the continent. And one of the best known ones here is called Silfra, and in Silfra you can actually scuba dive in it. And the water is crystal clear. The water is always about 3 to 4 degrees centigrade, so it's pretty chilly, but very clear because it's been filtering through the rock. The whole reason a lake exists at all is because the bottom of the graben there has actually subsided beneath the water table level. So the surface of a lake is 100 meters above sea level, but the deepest part of a lake is just 14 meters deep. Yes, as I said, it's the graben, and you've got the extension fractures. And yeah, one thing just to say is in the bottom of these grabens, often you get eruptions coming out in the middle part of the graben, but rarely do you actually have eruptions coming out on the boundary faults, because the graben is rather like a cork, and as the plates pull apart, it drops down, sealing the sides. But you do get extension on the surface of the graben, and that can allow dikes to reach the surface, and you can have eruptions in the center portions. So a little bit about the Parliament. The Parliament was either exactly here where I've got my arrow, or it was here where we walked down. And it's the Alf thing, and it claims to be the longest running Parliament in the world. It was established in 930 AD, and the centre of the gathering was called the Logberg or Law Rock. The law speaker would take his seat there and explain the laws, and the rock face would project his voice. So this is actually, it's a World Heritage Site because of this, but also the wonderful geological story. We then journey on and we cross the graben, and we get to the far side of the graben. And the far side of the graben, which we're entering onto the Eurasian plate, is a bit of a less impressive cliff. It's a smaller cliff, but we leave, that's the normal fault that goes right down to depth, and we carry on our journey. But from this point, we have a nice view of various volcanoes in the area, and the Hafranbjörg volcano. It's a classic table mountain, and we're going to talk about these table mountains more later on in the talk. But essentially, they've erupted under ice, and when they've erupted, they've melted the ice around them, and that gives them these very steep sides. And this, though, in contrast, is a classic shield volcano, Skaldbreiður, which just means a shield-shaped volcano, and that is erupted not under ice, and basalt has flowed and made this shield shape in many different eruptions. We get on to Giza. This is probably the most famous geyser anywhere in the world. It lends its name to all of the world's geysers, but I've noted that Yellowstone that I visited on my America tour is pretty famous too. But these, there are two geysers at Giza. There's actually the Great Geyser, and there's actually Strokja. And these are the only two erupting hot springs which are politically in Europe. Great Geyser now only erupts a few times a year to a height of just 10 meters, but in the 19th century it used to reach 170 meters. However, Strokja erupts every few minutes, so you're highly likely to see that erupt. Great Geyser no longer erupts as much as it did because there was an earthquake that actually sort of affected its plumbing. But yes, Strokja erupts every 5 to 10 minutes, up to about 10 to 20 meters high, but sometimes 35 meters high. And then an eruption in 1896 rejuvenated Great Geyser, which I haven't got a picture of, but it caused Strokja to be dormant. And then, because it's such a good tourist attraction, in 1963, a hole was actually drilled into the plumbing of Strokja to actually rejuvenate it and get it erupting again. But why do these geysers actually erupt? Well, the water everywhere in the system is actually above 100 degrees centigrade, but it won't evaporate because of the pressure. But when the water enters the sort of empty tube, it can actually expand, spread out. That reduces the pressure and it can cause it to boil and erupt and empty the tube again, and then it refills, boils and erupts. And that's why these actual geyser explosions actually happen. And then the last stop on that first day is the Gift Foss waterfall. It's a spectacular waterfall. It's the second largest by volume in Iceland. And the big sort of geological point of interest, apart from the size of the waterfall, is there's actually three separate faults. And you've got these three separate faults orientating like this. And on this diagram, this shows two of the faults, and the other fault is running that way. And what it's thought is this big fault that I'm stroking the line of now, that was probably an extensional fault from the spreading of the plates when this was a rift. And then these two other faults occurred by later earthquakes. So actually walking down to the waterfall and standing where the arrow is here, you can look down this fault, and that's what that view is there. I'm looking down that fault. Here in Iceland, at Foss waterfall, it's one of the very few places on our tour we actually see some sedimentary rocks, because nearly everything is volcanic rock. Here we've got you've got a lava flow, and actually you've got a layer of strong sediments, a layer of weak sediments, a layer of strong sediments, and another lava flow, which these were probably being deposited by the ancestral rivers. So that is the end of that first day. So we went from the airport around to Hella. And then the next day we leave there and we take a day trip out onto the Westman Islands to sleep the night near the Eyjafjallajökull volcano, probably in the village of Vik. So the very first thing we see the next day as we're journeying on, we get views of Hekla volcano, which is a really beautiful volcano, nearly 1,500 meters high, one of Iceland's most active volcanoes, and over 20 different eruptions have occurred since 874. Hekla is number 15 on that chart there. The last eruption was in 2000, so pretty recently. And during the Middle Ages, Europeans called it the gateway to hell. This volcano frequently has very large eruptions in the past, and it's covered much of Iceland with tephra over the years, and these have been used to date the eruptions of Iceland's other volcanoes. And approximately 10% of the tephra created in Iceland in the last 1,000 years has actually come from Hekla. So that's a massive amount. And cumulatively, the volcano has produced one of the largest volumes of lava of any in the world in the last millennium, around 8 cubic kilometers of lava. And then before we join the ferry to go out to the Westman Islands, we stop, we enter into another global geopark. This is the Katla Geopark. And here we stop at this waterfall, the Sólangla Foss waterfall. And that's actually flowing off the side of the Eyjafjallajökull volcano, which is this famous volcano that stopped air traffic. And what this cliff is, it's actually an old sea cliff. So in the last ice age, when there was a lot of water locked up in the ice sheets, sea level was higher, and the sea eroded the sea cliff. So we stop here, examine the beautiful waterfall, and look at the different layers of lava and ash. And then we make our way to the ferry port, and we take a ferry out to the Westman Islands. And as we're taking the ferry out, we can look back and get a good view of Eyjafjallajökull, which is this white area here. This is the ice cap sitting on top of the volcano. And this famously erupted between the 20th of March and the 12th of April in 2010. It was actually a small eruption happening between these two glaciers. The first eruption was a small eruption between the two glaciers. But then on the 14th of April, a second eruption started from the summit caldera, and the lava was more sticky, effusive, and explosive. And it actually melted through an ice thickness of 250 meters. And because there was so much water, it produced a huge amount of ash. And it caused an ash column that was 11 kilometers high, and this grounded the air traffic in Europe for several days. And actually, and this caused, this big havoc that made the news, and people had fun trying to pronounce the name, which I also find hard to pronounce. So the ferry comes into the Westman Islands. It sails in here, and this is a wonderful view of the Westman Islands. And the Westman Islands are named after, they're called Vestmannaeyjar in Icelandic, and they're called the Westman Islands because in AD 1870 some Irish slaves escaped their Viking masters, killed their Viking master and fled to the islands. They were later pursued by the Viking's brother and found on the islands and killed, but the islands were named after them. But in this aerial photograph, you can see a number of things. You can see the oldest part of the islands here, which have erupted in the last ice age under ice. It's got this yellow-coloured palagonite tooth, which exists when the volcanic ash comes into the melt water of the glaciers and hydrates. And you can see these various, this is an eruption that erupted in the 1970s, and this is other eruptions here. And back here is the famous Surtsey volcano, which is yet another World Heritage Site, and that erupted in the 1960s. So we'll come on to talking more about that. So the Vestmannaeyjar Islands are a seaward extension of the East Volcanic Zone. So up to now, we've been dealing with the West Volcanic Zone, but the East Volcanic Zone comes down and heads out to sea, and the Westman Islands are actually their own volcanic system, number 12 on the list. And actually, there are about 80 different volcanic edifices, but only 18 of them rise above the sea. And the oldest part, as I said, was the North Cliffs. They erupted between 13 and 15,000 years ago, initially two separate islands, but they would have erupted under ice in the Ice Age initially, but then they were two separate islands. Then the next volcano to erupted was in the very far south, Storhofi, and that erupted about between 7 and 6,500 years ago. Then there was another eruption here called Seyfell, and that is half flooded still, but that erupted 6.2 thousand years ago. Then Helgafell erupted and united Jaime as a big island. That erupted 5.9 thousand years ago. Surtsey, that was in 1963 to 1967, and Eldfell here, that erupted in 1972. And we're going to talk on about that quite a bit. So here the ferry comes in. This is the ferry passing these palagonite toothed cliffs which formed under ice. Here is a view of Eldfell. 1973 it erupted. Sorry, I said 72. 73. And this is the lava flow that flowed from it, and it nearly sealed off the port of Jaime, and we're going to talk about that later on. And the ferry can just squeeze through a narrow gap into the port. So the very first thing we do when we arrive on the island is we drive right down to the southern tip of the island to Storhofi, and we get a view of Surtsey Island. And then looking north, you've got the Snæfell cone we talked about, and Eyjafjallajökull on the horizon. And we talk about Surtsey. It was the new island born, and it's the type Surtsean eruption. So whenever you have a volcano forming a new island anywhere in the world, it gets called a Surtsean eruption. It was named after Surtur, the Norse god of fire. And here is some images of it erupting, and here's some images of what it looks like now. And the eruption rumbled on for 3.5 years, producing a new island, and it's got two different tooth cones. But these vents were originally erupting underwater, and when they finally broke the surface, then it stopped producing pillow lavas and started producing lava fire fountains. And the material was splattered down, and it built up these two different tooth cones. Here is a picture of it erupting. The island is actually the subaerial part of a much larger volcano. It actually forms a 6-kilometer long submarine ridge. It was first noticed on the 14th of November 1963 by fishermen who were tending their nets. But when the eruption had just finished, the island was actually quite a bit bigger than it is today. The island has lost about 1 cubic kilometer of material due to erosion since the island finished. One of the main reasons why it's a World Heritage Site is it's, this new island appeared, and it's of great interest to see how life colonizes the island. And the first fly was found on the island back in May 1967. The first vascular plants were even further back in 1965. And today, 5 different species of bird breed on the island, and the first to breed in it were fulmars back in 1970. So we then come into the main town of Heimei, and we go for a hike and optional hike and climb up to the summit of Eldfell volcano and learn about what happened here. So on the 22nd of January 1973 at 10 p.m. there were mild earthquakes, but then they became sharper at 1:40 a.m. But there were only 2 seismometers in southwest Iceland at the time, one in Vik and one in Reykjavik. So the geologists didn't think the eruption was occurring here, so no warning was given. And then on the 1:55 a.m. on the 23rd of January, so the next night, the eruption began, and a fissure broke out, which stretched this whole dotted line here. And it had a continuous, semi-continuous curtain of fire fountains, and the fire was reaching up 50 to 150 meters high. And within 3 days, so the activity had reduced to a single vent, which started to build up the Eldfell cone. And in the first 12 hours, the eruption spewed out 30 million tons of tephra and lava, and the eruption lasted for just over 5 months, ending on the 3rd of July 1973. It increased the size of the island by 20%, but what it did was it buried all of this portion of the town and nearly closed off the harbour. And the harbour is actually home to Iceland's largest fishing port. So it would have been catastrophic for the economy if it had. So on that very first night, though, 300 people, mostly sick and elderly, were airlifted to Reykjavik. And also there's actually a NATO base, which is now the airport at Keflavik. So they coordinated that evacuation. And also, luckily, the entire fishing fleet was actually in port that night because there had been storms the night before. So you had 60 to 70 fishing boats in port, and they were able to evacuate the rest of the population. So most of the town was covered in several meters of tephra. A quarter of the town was buried by lava, so 417 houses were lost. But an extensive network of pipes and pumps was set up to spray water on the lava to try and fight the advance of the lava. And it actually worked. They actually prevented this lava flow from going right across and closing the port. And then after the eruption had finished, the spraying water on the lava and collecting the steam provided the town with heating for the next 25 years. So we drive around the town and we can see the lava flow here just arresting, coming down. This is the portion of the town all just underneath the lava flow here. This is the narrow passage where the ferry comes in. This is a Norwegian church, which the Norwegians donated to the town, after the eruption occurred as a gift. But the highlight of the town is the visit to the Eldheimer Museum, nicknamed the Pompeii of the North, because this museum has actually been built over excavated houses that were dug out of the tephra, the material that came out of the volcanic crater. So, and it gives a really good account of the 1973 eruptions, but also the Surtsey eruption that we discussed before. So these are some views inside the museum, and you can see these were actual houses, and you can walk above the houses and around the houses, and it's a really good site. Then we do the summit hike up to Eldfell. Sorry, I said we did that before. Here is a nice signpost here showing the town before the eruption and then showing it during. And that fire fissure went right through all those houses, and they were all destroyed. So views climbing up, looking at the Helgafell cone, and then you reach the summit of Eldfell. It's still hot up there. You can actually put your hand in sort of what probably were fumaroles in the past, but there's still some hot air comes out of them. And also from the summit, you can actually get views back to Surtsey as well. I think that's Surtsey just there on the horizon. So we then come back off the island and sleep on the mainland, and then we start on our next day. So the first stop on the next day is we're in the Katla Geopark, which we were briefly in the following morning. There's the Skogafoss waterfall, which also flows off the Eyjafjallajökull volcano. Here is a photograph of this volcano. We also passed the Katla volcano, and the Katla volcano actually was had some worry earlier on last year. Between the 3rd and the 9th of May, there was intense seismic swarms going on, but nothing more. Then our next stop is called Pertuis, which means Peter's Island. And this was actually formed in a submarine eruption, and it actually became an island, and it's now connected with the mainland. And during the last ice age, towards the end of the ice age, you would have had the ice where this dotted line is now. These areas were ice-free, but sea level was higher, and the southern portion of Iceland was actually a bay, and Pertuis was actually an island. And 1,000 years ago, when it was named, perhaps it was still a real island, but now it's attached to the mainland. Then we come on to the famous Reynis-Fjara beach, which is popular with geologists and tourists alike. And here we come to see the fabulous columnar basalt, which is rather like Fingal's Cave or the Giant's Causeway. You've had lava flows, and then the lava's become very well insulated and allowed to have a long time to cool, and the crystals like to arrange themselves in the most space-saving way, and they form these hexagonal cooling structures that cool perpendicular from the cooling surface. So yeah, just a really nice sort of a place to be and take photos and enjoy the columns. On the beach, looking down the beach, you can also see the Derhole peninsula here, which also used to be another island, another hydroclastic mountain that erupted underneath the sea. It's now risen above the sea, and the waves have cut these vertical cliffs around it. Then our journey proceeds, and we start proceeding along this sort of side of Iceland. And as we go, we pass over numerous lava flows. And what we're actually passing over is the fire districts. And what these are emitted from is the Grímsvötn volcanic system. And the Grímsvötn volcano is actually under the Vatnajökull ice cap, and it's actually Iceland's most active volcano. But what we're looking at here is in between 934 and 940 AD, you actually had a 70-kilometer long fissure erupted. So absolutely vast, 75 kilometers long. And it was reactivating an old extension graben, and a massive lava flows came out, covering 800 square kilometers. And there were 30 different explosive phases. Some of the eruptive plumes of ash would have been 14 kilometers high into the air. And it would have been absolutely disastrous for all the local people, with high quantities of sulfur dioxide, and it probably would have caused famine, and it had a really big effect on Icelandic history. Then we come forward to between 1783 and 84. There was a second eruption, smaller but still enormous. A 27-kilometer long fracture occurred there, and the lava that was emitted from that, well, the eruption had the effect, the aerosols emitted in the atmosphere from that eruption had the effect of cooling the northern hemisphere by 1.3 degrees for actually 3 years. So we just mentioned those because we drive over these different lava flows. First of all, the 934 eruption, and then the 1783 eruption, and we stop and briefly talk about those before. Yeah, this is just a diagram of a volcanic system. So here would be Grímsvötn volcano, here would be the dike stretching away from it, and periodically they break the surface with these big fissure eruptions. And Grímsvötn is here, number 19, right under the Vatnajökull ice sheet, and these are the fissures stretching away from it. So the next stop is Mount Longmanupur. It's a big sea cliff. It's the highest cliff in Iceland. It's 767 meters high. It erupted in the last ice age underneath the ice sheet, and the different layers. You've got different layers of what's called Moberg. And Moberg is this plagonite tooth. So it's ash layers that erupted into the water, and you've got layers of that, layers of lava. So erupted in the ice age. Then when the ice receded, the sea has got to work in it, and it was a sea cliff when the sea levels were higher, and now it stands loud and proud. So that is just here. We then cross over this big outwash plain, this big sand dune, to come into this area here. And what we're crossing is the Skagardar sand dune. It's the largest sand dune in Iceland. It's a big alluvial fan from which is stretching out from the largest outlet glacier of the Vatnajökull ice cap, which is the largest glacier in Europe. And what happens periodically, you have these catastrophic events called Jökulhlaups, and where you have massive flooding in this area. And this can happen in either one of two ways. You either have an eruption of the Grimsvötn volcano here, which melts a whole load of ice and causes all the water to flood out, or there's actually a lake that exists, or did exist, it's now drained, but did exist in this area, and that sometimes drains. And in 2011, there was an eruption that produced twice the volume of water as that 63-day-long Eyjafjallajökull eruption in just 3 days, and caused massive amounts of water to flood out. And actually, the main hotspot that we talked about at the beginning of the talk is centered under the Grimsvötn volcanic system. So here is a picture I took off the internet. That's that cliff we stopped at on the last stop. The road crosses the outwash plain, and this is where all the water can flood down. And this actually is the water flooding down. There's a photograph of that happening. These are various volcanoes around the area that can cause the flooding out. And this is the 2011 eruption of Grimsvötn. Here is some pictures of the water rushing down, and this is what happened to some of the former bridges that used to cross the area. Anyway, our journey, we cross the outwash plain and we come into this area here called Skaftafell. And it's in the Vatnajökull National Park, which is yet another UNESCO World Heritage Site. So the third one we visited on the trip. And it actually covers 14% of Iceland. So all of the Vatnajökull ice cap and some other areas. The area we come into, Skaftafell, was once its own national park, but it's now absorbed into that area. And it's a really lovely place because it's actually got trees. And trees, well, obviously, actually, I know in Shetland trees are a rare thing, but trees are also a very rare thing in Iceland. And it's one of the only areas of Iceland that has any trees. So it's actually a very popular with local Icelanders to visit. And you've got these small sort of shrubby trees just tucked in a little sort of microclimate in this area here. And we take a hike in that area and go and visit a beautiful waterfall. But what we are looking back across here at, this volcano here is Eyjafjallajökull. Sorry, I pronounced it badly, but it's Iceland's tallest mountain, 2,110 meters high, and it is here, and it's possibly the starting of a new rift. And this volcano actually has basalt and andesite in it, but it also has some rhyolite in it due to fractional crystallization of the magma chamber. But I'm going to come on and talk about that shortly. So in our national park, we walk through the trees, which start off being real trees at the car park, but by the time we get a little bit higher, they become knee-high bushes. And we reach this point where we can look at the beautiful Svartifoss waterfall, which is flowing over these basaltic hexagonal cooling columns. We then leave that site and we come round the Eyjafjallajökull glacier and mountain to this point here, where we here's some more views of that mountain with the glaciers flowing down, where we can actually look at some of this rhyolitic rock. So most of the rocks in Iceland are basaltic with a few andesites, but in some places you do have rhyolite due to the fractional crystallization, these yellow areas on the map. And where we are right now is here, these little yellow splots. And in the moraine from this outlet glacier, you can find pieces of obsidian. And obsidian is a volcanic glass, and it can form from rhyolite or other very acidic lavas, and it's formed very quickly, so the crystals haven't had time to form. Here we can collect pieces of it. We then move on, if I just come back to that diagram back here, to look at these two glacial lagoons here. So the first one we're coming to is Fjallar Salon, and in the background here you can see the big volcano, that big mountain we were talking about before, the highest in Iceland, with a big glacier flowing off it, and poking up above the ice here are rhyolite domes. And then in the foreground there's a lagoon with icebergs floating in it. But the most famous iceberg lagoon in Iceland is the Jökulsárlón. So the one we were just at earlier on is this one, and now we come to this one. And here you can see icebergs all floating and getting stuck as they try and wait for the tide to drain out of this little channel into the sea. But look at these hash lines. You have a real stark story of climate change here. And in 1890, the ice used to reach right out here to the shoreline. And you can see the years. It might be small for you to see on your screens, but 1890, 1930, 1945, 1960, 1982, 2004, 2018. So this is going back many, many kilometers back. So it's a big story of climate change we can discuss while we're there as well. So here's some of the nice scenic pictures looking back into the Vatnajökull ice cap. Here are some of the icebergs, seals here feeding as the tide goes in and out. And it's just a very scenic place that actually looks really quite polar, even though Iceland is sort of more just sort of subpolar. So here is a picture of the icebergs all caught here and about to getting ready to drain out. And as they drain out down this beach, which has been nicknamed Diamond Beach, because on Diamond Beach, you have all these diamonds or bits of ice just sitting on the shore. And then we get to the nearby town Hoffen, where we spend the night. And one trip we were there, we had Northern Lights. In fact, we've had Northern Lights there, 2 different trips now. So Northern Lights can actually be seen any time on this tour, but you need clear skies and you need it to be nighttime in September, where there's nighttime, not midsummer. But of course, Northern Lights is something you probably see in Shetland quite frequently anyway. So here we are. That's the end of that day. We reached Hoffen. And then on the preceding day, so on the following day, we go from Hoffen and we journey up the east coast of Iceland, looking at some older volcanic rocks and the sort of eroded inners of older volcanoes before reaching the mighty Dettifoss waterfall and sleeping around the shores of Lake Miva for the next 2 nights. So our first stop of the day as we leave around is this place called Osterhorn. And here we get to see a mixing of 2 magma chambers. You've actually had all the lava that was above has been eroding away. So you're now in magma chambers. And this green color here is gabbro, which is the source rock for say normal lava basalt. But then this yellow is actually graniphire, which is a granitic rock. It's like granite but finer grained, and that would have been producing a rhyolite. And it's as I said before, forms from the fractional crystallization of magma chambers. So we actually have various stops. One where we can stop and look at the gabbro, and then we stop and we can look at the graniphire, and then we have a stop where we can actually look at the little blobs of basalt that are within the graniphire. So you've got the 2 magma chambers mixing. So presumably this graniphire melt forced its way up between the basalt and the gabbro, and the gabbro is there floating in it, and that's very interesting. And there's also this thing called the net vein complex, where you've actually got these veins of graniphire looking like a net cutting across gabbro as well. So so that's that stop, and then we carry on and we make a stop at this nice waterfall flowing over a dike. And you can see all these different layers of lava, all would have been emitted out by volcanoes, but like some sort of, I guess, 14 million years ago. This is really some of the oldest rocks in Iceland here in the far east. But all of these layers of lava get cut by dikes, and these dikes rise up to the surface, presumably feeding other eruptions. And this dike here that the waterfall's flowing over would have been feeding one of those eruptions. And at this stop, we can again find some rhyolite, because there's actually an eruptive centre back here that was a rhyolite dome. And you can actually find some agmundales. You have these little vesicles in the basaltic lava that have got these special minerals which have filled the vesicles as well. So moving on, as we move north, we come around and we're coming into northern Iceland now, and we have a stop on the corner of this road And on the corner of this road, if the weather's clear, we get some great views looking at mountains, which we're getting back to the active areas. We're looking at these line of purple mountains here, which they are all erupted underneath the ice. And if the weather's really clear, you can look right down towards Askja volcano and get views of the Hurdlebrei volcano. And as I said before, the Askja volcano system is 200 kilometers long. So here is the Hurdlebrei volcano taken with a telephoto lens from that corner, and this is a really beautiful volcano, and it's one of these table mountains, or Tua is the other term for it. And what would have happened is the volcano would have started erupting under the ice, and it would have melted ice around it, and it would have had steep sides as it's in this sort of pool of ice. But actually, with Hurdlebrei, that's what these bottom portions did. The top portion of the volcano, look, it's a shield volcano. So the top portion of the volcano actually broke out above the water and made a normal shield volcano on the top. So you've got two different types. You've got the Tua volcano on the bottom and the shield volcano on the top. And many Icelanders consider this to be the most beautiful mountain in Iceland, and it's given the nickname the Queen of Icelandic Mountains. And actually, on a very clear day, you can actually see all the way to Kefrafjall, which is we're right up here, which is right down to 20. So that's why I got that picture there. We then, but we're going to come closer to those volcanoes on the following day of the tour. So we then carry on and we reach Dettifoss Waterfall. And Dettifoss Waterfall was back inside the Vatnajökull National Park and World Heritage Site. And this is the mightiest waterfall in Iceland. The fall here is 45 meters. The width is 100 meters, and it's actually reputed to be the most powerful waterfall anywhere in Europe. This waterfall, incredibly, this canyon that it's basically there's a canyon to the north of the waterfall. No, sorry, it's a canyon to the south of the waterfall, and this canyon formed amazingly in just three different volcanic eruptions. So you had three eruptions they occurred between 7,100 years ago and 2,000 years ago underneath the Vatnajökull ice sheet, and they caused enormous amounts of discharge of water that poured through this area, carving out the canyon. And the peak discharge of the biggest flood was estimated to be 900,000 cubic meters per second. And if you compare that to the Amazon rainforest, its average discharge is just 209,000 cubic meters per second. And the Amazon River is 200 miles wide at its mouth. So I don't know how, but all of that water was somehow forcing its way through here and eroded out this valley, this gorge in a very quick time. So we then leave Dettifoss Waterfall, and we have a little stop just at this red spot here on the road. And the reason why we're stopping there is this lava flow arrests just here. And that lava flow is something we want to talk about later on. It's actually the furthest the lava reached from an eruption of Askja that occurred between 1874 and 1876. So you actually had, it's actually an eruption of the Askja volcanic system. So it's actually a fissure eruption rather than actually coming out from its main crater. But we see that there. And then we stop at the Miva nature baths, which are just a nice place to swim, and they're heated. It's kind of half man-made, but also the heat source though is natural. The heat source is from the volcano, but it's been dammed up and sort of turned into an artificial pool. So we stop there before getting to the shores of Lake Miva for the next 2 nights. So we're now on to there's just 3 more days left. So the next day we're going to journey to Askja volcano. On the way to Askja volcano, we actually go by dirt road all the way, and it's this green dotted track that I've marked, and we have to take a specially modified vehicle to go on this, which can ford through 2 different rivers. Now sometimes the rivers they're not too high, but if there's been a lot of melting of the ice, they can actually get incredibly deep. So you can't rely on getting through them in a normal car. So the first stop, we stop at a scoria cone, which is nicknamed the horse pen, and then we pass the Hurdlebrei volcano, which I talked about before, we ford various rivers. Here's the Hurdle Bride volcano. We learn about an outlaw that used to live in this little hole here, and this is a little oasis, that oasis is tiny. See on the map there, coming past Hurdle Bride volcano, because this whole area is a desert, and we're really experiencing being in the central highlands of Iceland in this volcanic desert. Here's the Hurdle Bride volcano with its two different forms, as I talked about before. We stop at an extension fracture here, which has got water gushing through it. And then we stop at a site where we can see a whole lot of pumice from the 1874 eruption. The whole land is littered with pumice. This is the Geological volcano that I photographed the day before from further away with a telephoto lens, with the Vatnajökull ice cap behind. And then finally we get to Askja. And this is a big long day. This is actually a 12-hour day to get to Askja and get back. But Askja has three different nested calderas. This is the Collier caldera. This is the oldest, and that formed in the Pleistocene. Then the largest here, the actual main Askja volcano, that's 8 kilometers wide, and that formed in the Holocene. And then this one, the Vatn caldera. This is 5 kilometers wide, and it has a lake 150 to 200 meters deep. But amazingly, this caldera formed in the 1875 eruption, and it took 40 years to reach its current depth. But it is a caldera that has formed, sort of in human times that science recorded. And Askja has erupted more than 1,754 times in the last 7,000 years. So our little journey, our little green dirt road, actually carries all the way up to the edge of the caldera here and stops where an eruption occurred in 1961. And here you can see the 1961 lava. Some of it flows down this way and stops, but the vast majority of it's flowing down away from the caldera rim. And this began on the 26th of October. There was a 0.7 kilometer long fissure that I've marked here with a red line. The lava fountains shot lava up 500 meters high into the air, but within 10 hours it produced this 7.5 kilometer long lava field, which later extended to covered 11 cubic kilometers. The eruption lasted 5 weeks. So we stop and we look at the cones from it, and then we walk across the main Askja volcano caldera to get to the caldera that formed in 1874. So here are some pictures of the 1961 fissure. Here are some of the splatter cones associated with it. This is our group. And this is the walk across the Askja volcano. It's all quite flat, but as you walk across it, the ground all sounds very echoey, because actually what you've got is there was ice, and then in 1874 it all got covered in pumice, and you're walking on that pumice, but the ice is still there, and as some of the ice melts it becomes hollow, so you can hear this sort of echoing, rather unnerving hollow noise as you walk across this path. But then you get to the rim of the Osku Vatn caldera, and this is the lake behind. And in the foreground, there is this smaller lake here called Viti, which formed from a hydromagmatic eruption. So when the magma reached water, it caused this explosive little crater to form right at the very end of this 1875 eruption. So a little bit about the eruption. It was a Plinian eruption, so volcanic explosivity index 5, and it took part as rifting was occurring between 1874 and 1876, its dense column of steam was seen rising from as much as 100 kilometers away, farmers from Miva came and investigated it and saw already the ground had subsided 10 meters, and the crater was spewing out mud and debris, and this was the start of the caldera. And then 3 days later, a big fissure eruption started occurring, which is the one we saw the end of earlier on before those nature baths. Yeah, by the time the eruption had reached its maximum, it actually had a grey tephra column that was reaching the tephra was falling out from it from up to 70 kilometers away. And then within time, you can see these diagrams here, actually ash and material from the eruption was falling out over Scandinavia. So it was a huge eruption. Anyway, then things were quiet and an eruptive activity resumed between 1920 and 30. There were 5 separate eruptions occurring on ring fractures around this new caldera, including a 6-kilometer long fissure. And in 1876, some Danish geologists were observing the area, yeah, they were measuring things, but I'm not sure what I'm telling you about there. But anyway, yeah, I'm just going on saying that it's had various new eruptions. But the lake took 32 years to fill, and it's now 224 meters deep. But the most recent story of Askja is actually just from 2 years ago, between well, just just 2 years ago, between August 2021 and November 2022. It was actually observed that the crater floor on the western end of the lake had actually risen 40 centimeters, which caused some concern, but then it wasn't accompanied by any increase in seismic activity. So the alert was reduced, and it's allowed to still visit there. So here are some various volcanic deposits from the 1875 eruption. You can see there's all layers of pumice. Layers of pumice everywhere. This is layers from the pyroclastic flows, a sort of finer tephra, and then you've got pumice all on top of it. And then this is inside that VT crater, which I showed you before. It is possible to climb down into it, and you certainly were allowed to swim in it, but then it got stopped when this uplift was occurring. I'm not sure if you're allowed to swim in it or not, but the water bubbled and there's fumaroles in there. Yeah, and that was it. That's Askja. So we're back to Lake Meaver, and I'm going to tell you about the area around Lake Meaver before we then just journey back to Keflavik on the last day. So the area around Lake Meaver is actually a volcanic El Dorado. There's just wondrous things to see there. And on this penultimate day of a tour, we visit all of these red spots on this map. And I'll quickly tell you about them now. The very first thing we do is start learning about the Krafla volcanic system, which is number 23 on this map. And it's actually, Krafla is actually a volcano with a caldera, but this caldera has mostly been filled up now by subsequent eruptions. So it's actually very hard to actually see where the caldera was. But the first stop of the day is to see some of the lava flows that flowed out between 1724 and 1729, when they come down and reach the shores of Lake Meaver. We then come into the caldera, and in the center of the caldera is another crater called Viti, which also, like the other Viti, formed from a hydromagmatic explosion at the start of the Meaver Fires eruption and in 1724. So we visit that, and from this area here, we can look down and see this hydrothermal, or this geothermal power plant, and all the fun stuff like these showers doing hot water and things. The Krafla geothermal power plant has 33 different boreholes, and it's able to produce 500 gigawatt hours of electricity every year. So we learn about also that the Krafla fires, there was an eruption from 1975 to 1984, and these are the lavas from that. So they on this chart are they actually flowed northwards away from Lake Meaver. They're these orange lava, these purple lava flows. And then we come out of Krafla, and on the sides of Krafla, we stop at the Hevria Namafjall geothermal area, which is one of the best areas anywhere in Iceland to see fumaroles and mud pots. This field has been in existence for at least 11,000 years, and you see all the mud boiling away. And what a mud pot actually is, it's a fumarole that's actually drowned. So as the gases are coming through the rock, the sulfuric acid breaks the rock down into mud, and the gases are bubbling through the mud. So if they weren't drowned, they would just actually be a normal fumaroles. So you can smell all the hydrogen sulfide gas, which smells like rotten eggs. So this is a wonderful experience to walk around in all the steam, and you really feel like you're in a really living volcanic environment. This is just some of the boreholes that have been drilled in the area when they were going to build a geothermal plant there, which they have done. It's actually just the other side of the mountain. And this is just showing where the water comes from to provide the which is involved in all the fumaroles in the area. We'll gloss over that. But there are two big fumaroles in the mud pot area, which are big kind of sort of sites for the tourists to take pictures of. But actually, quite funnily, they're actually man-made. They are actually the result of two boreholes that were drilled when they were doing exploration for sulfur, drilled in the 1950s. And they didn't actually mean to turn them into fumaroles. But now, and you can see the sort of rubble placed on top of them. But now they make a lot of steam and actually quite photogenic. But there are also natural fumaroles and sulfurtaras. Sulfurtaras are fumaroles that deposit sulfur, and you can see on this Nam Fagel mountain, which is again is this yellow color because it erupted under ice. But on the flanks of it, you can see all the steam coming out from the fumaroles, and a really great area. We then drive to the top of Nam Fagel and have a look at the view, and you get a good view of the Fagel tooth cone and the hydrothermal plant, which is where we actually swam the night before. And also from this site, you can get a good view of this great extension fault here with the mountain pulling apart. So you've got a fault here, and the bottom has dropped down, the extension. And looking into Lake Meaver, there are all these so-called rootless cones, which I'm going to come and talk about in a few more slides. We look in the Grotcha caves, which are caverns caused by extension fault fractures. And some people like to put 1 foot on one side, 1 foot on the other, and say they're straddling the continents. In fact, you're not. You're just in the middle of a graben standing on extension fractures. But still, it is the forces of the plates pulling apart that are pulling those fractures apart. And then we climb the Havafagel tooth cone. And this erupted 2.7 thousand years ago in Lake Meaver. Was bigger at the time. It's here at the shore, at the edge of Lake Meaver now, but it was bigger at the time, and it formed a huge crater because it was a hydromagmatic explosion mixing with the water. And the crater has a 1 kilometer diameter, and it had pyroclastic flows, and some surges traveled out and flows traveled up as much as 3 kilometers away from the cone. So we climb up to the cone, look down inside, and it has a smaller little cone in the center. And here we're examining the pyroclastic flows which make up the side of the cone. And then this just a little geological map of the area shows something of the geological history of the area. You had lava flows represented by this color erupting about 7,000 years ago. Then everything went quiet for about 3,000 years. And then there were volcanic eruptions here 3.8 thousand years ago. And then 3,000 years ago, you had tephra falling down from Hekla in the south of Iceland we talked about before. And then 2.7 thousand years ago, this tooth cone, which we just climbed, it erupted. And then 2.3 thousand years ago, you had a whole row of cones here emitting all this lava. And then things were quiet for 1,000 years. And you had the Meaver fires and the Krafla fires in 1724 and 1975. So that sort of summarizes the area. But yeah, just two more things to see before we leave the area. One is Dimborgi, and Dimborgi is this area here. And what you're actually looking at is something that was a lava lake. And you had a lake of lava, but what would happen is that the lava was puddling like this, and there'd be wet sediments beneath, and these wet sediments would cause explosions, which made these cones, which would sort of explode through the liquid lava, and they were slightly cooler, so they solidified, and then the liquid lava drained out, leaving these cones standing behind. So that's what this environment is interpreted as. But actually in Lake Meaver itself, when the lava flows were flowing into the lake or flowing over this wet marshy ground, you would get steam exploding, not in a lava lake, and just into the air. And what it left behind were these rings, or these so-called rootless cones, because they are like small little volcanoes, but they've got no feeder dikes going to them. But they were just produced by the lava going over wet ground and the steam exploding and making these craters. And this is just a sort of diagrams of how that might form a rootless cone. So here you've got a lava, you've got a lava tube, and then it breaks, the lava comes into contact with wet sediment, boom, explodes through, makes a crater. Godafoss waterfall, it's just on the side of the road as we're driving into Akureyri. It's just a beautiful waterfall flowing over lava flows. And finally, we get to our penultimate, well, second to last night of the trip. And we're in capital of Northern Iceland, Akureyri. This is a lovely little town with a cathedral and a botanic garden, nice swimming pool. And actually, here's a ship I used to work on when I used to work in the Arctic. And this ship has just come back from Greenland. Actually, I was in Greenland with Alan earlier on last year on this very same ship. And just by luck, it happened to be in port when I was doing my Iceland tour, so I was able to say hello to everyone. But that's digressing. And we're now at the very end of the talk, and I hope I haven't overrun time because this talk is quite long, I think. But anyway, we just leave Akureyri and we have one stop before getting back to Reykjavik and Keflavik. So, what that stop is in the Snæfellsnes volcanic belt. And this is actually a rift that's no longer active, but the Snæfellsnes volcano is still active. And actually, you can see the Snæfellsnes volcano from the capital, Reykjavik, on a clear day. Here you're looking across, seeing it on a clear day. But we're leaving Akureyri in the north here. We're journeying around, and we make one stop here, just where it says 28, before coming back to the airport. And this is just explaining how the rifts have jumped. So we'll skip over that. We stop at the Grabrock volcanic cone. So this erupted 175,000 before Common Era, and it's a basaltic scoria cone. So you would have had a big lava fountain firing up and settling down, scattering around, building up this cone, and then eventually the cone became full of lava, and then the side breached, and the lava flow flowed away. And we climb up and we walk around on this lovely boarded walkway and examine that, and it's all pretty scenic. Here's a picture of another volcanic cone adjacent to Gabrok, and that's it. And then we get back to Keflavik, and that's my geological journey of Iceland completed for you. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, James. That was fascinating. It's obviously a great place to visit as a geologist, a wonderful lab. I wonder how the inhabitants of Iceland feel about it. It's obviously a difficult sort of place to live, I imagine. Have you seen any major changes over the years you've been visiting?
Well, I have seen one very big change. I've seen a massive increase in tourism. It's become much more popular. And when you drive around on that ring road going around Iceland, sort of 10. In fact, I've been going to Iceland because I used to. One thing you didn't say in my introduction is I used to work on these Antarctic and Arctic cruise ships for 10 years before I set up my business. So I used to regularly go to Greenland and come back to Iceland. So I've been to Iceland pretty much every year for the last 20 years. And in that time, it's got so much busier. It's not like it's really busy. It's not like Southeast England, but it's busy compared to what it used to be. You used to be able to drive around. You wouldn't pass another car for like maybe an hour. You wouldn't see a car coming the other way, and you wouldn't catch up anything all day. But now there's pretty much always a car in front of you, and there's cars coming the other way. And they built a lot more hotels. So there's a much bigger tourist infrastructure than there used to be. So that's the big change I've seen.
One geological question, the rootless cones that you just described with that interesting mechanism of formation, are there any examples in the geological record?
Oh, I don't know. That's a very good question. I've seen things like the rootless cones in other parts of the world, which have been formed by recent lava flows. I was lucky enough to go to Tristan da Cunha a couple of times, and they've got things called hornitos, where I think the same thing, lava's flowed over wet ground, and it's then produced these craters. So I think they are known from other parts of the world, and whether they've been sort of like preserved, like sort of fossilized and into the past into the fossil record, I wouldn't know, but I guess there's no reason why they couldn't be.
There is actually fossilized rootless corns in Shetland.
Okay.
The cluster are supposed to be. I mean, it's semi-convincing, should we say. But volcanic cones of cluster are supposed to be rootless, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I hope I get to see those when I come and visit you.
It's a bit of a hike. We'll get to it.
Okay.
Ravina
Right.
has her hand up, but I can't see anybody else.
Rubina?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. Yes, I always have my hand up. Yeah, I mean, I kind of started out my geological education in Shetland. I knew nothing about geology before I came here and met Alan, and that was like to change my life. But you know, Shetland is called the Old Rock, or known as, and that's for a reason, because our youngest rocks are more than 300 million years old. And I remember like my first trip to Iceland, which was for a work meeting, and just I was so excited just looking at the land as we came in on the plane to land. And then the whole time I was there, I felt it had this like energy. And I'm not a hippie trippy person, but it did just feel like something happening. And actually listening to your talk today, I'm like, that's why. And I'm really glad that you've agreed to record it, because there was so much information there, James, to take in and absorb. And I was actually kind of stopped in my tracks really early in your talk when you were talking about the Fagradalfjall and saying that the eruptions had started in 2019 and then it had like reached a height of 340 meters. And I'm thinking, well, Runners Hill's our highest hill and it's only 450 meters. And I'm trying to imagine like a landscape changing to that extent in such a, well, in 4 years' time, from nothing to like heading towards Runners Hill proportions. And then when you were speaking about the Laxadilla flow, and you kind of had a little bit of a slip of the tongue and you said it was 3.8 million years ago, and then you had to like say no, 3.8 thousand. And just the idea of things like this happening in such recent history is just for me like phenomenal. So I haven't got a question at all, but I just wanted to say I really enjoyed that. I'm going to really enjoy looking back over it all and trying to take it all in. I should also say I am going to leave the recording on for the questions, just because there might be like interesting answers that we want to retain, but I won't put the question and answer session on the YouTube channel. So anyone who's watching, feel free to say whatever you like and it won't be broadcast.
Well, I'd like to really thank you for that comment. I know it wasn't a question, but you really hit the nail on the head there, because it is alive, isn't it? And in many ways, the geology in Shetland is, of course, more interesting than Iceland, because you've got so many different geological stories and so many different things to talk about. Iceland, well, it's just like brand new. It's just recent volcanoes, and that's like the only story. But this the thing is, it's alive right now. So it's changing in you can watch lava flowing, you can watch icebergs, and you can just see, as you're saying, you can just, the landscape does feel alive, and you're just seeing the processes in front of your eyes, and that's what its unique thing is, that sort of happening right now, as opposed to a massive long geological story where many things happened, and actually it's kind of more complex, because of course actually explaining the geology of Shetland is going to be much more complex. The geology of Iceland's quite easy, really, but it's all happening now. So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, I definitely got a little bit excited when you said there was a bit of sedimentary rock. I was like, oh, hallelujah, something new. But I'm assuming that sedimentary rock, all this is going to sound like a really dumb question, but I'm not a geologist, so it's okay. But the sedimentary rock, the sediments basically came from volcanic stuff eroding.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's just the rivers have eroded. Rivers maybe rework some volcanic ash, or it's even eroded some lava. But this sedimentary rock's only going to be like 1 million years old or less. It's not, it's not going to be old.
Yeah.
So
does anybody else have a question?
come on.
James,
think-
I wanted to say thank you very much. It's now 8 years since I followed almost inevitably, the ring road, as it's called, the route around the whole of Iceland with a few more via points than you had. But that was 2016, and it was part of a motorcycle tour. So, and this is riding your own bikes that have been freighted out there, which was an absolute delight. Just general tourism tour. So inevitably, people that had questions came to me. But I hadn't got any real knowledge about the event, just a rather generic picture. So I much enjoyed seeing lots of places there that I have actually been to, but what I didn't know was that the sulfur terras were from boreholes, but I very much enjoyed seeing those, because they were the first of the kind I'd ever seen. But my particular work in the background was on calderas as well. So that was albeit Jurassic to Ordovician ones, but it brought back quite a few memories. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for saying that, and that must have been great fun to go around on a motorbike. I'm pretty envious of that. That's really.
It was a stunning 2 weeks, absolutely, and we had faultless weather. It was extraordinary. The local guides that we had never known such calm weather in Iceland, never in their life.
Fantastic. Okay.
One final point from me, James, is having visited so many times, does your perspective on that aspect of plate tectonics sit more lively in your brain than it would if you were learning about it in a classroom?
Oh, well, I think so. I mean, for me, I mean, there's only so much you can learn in the classroom. I think it's just how my brain works. I love being. It's probably why I love geology anyway. But it's being outside and seeing it. If you're just in a classroom or reading a book, it's a bit more abstract. But when you're out seeing things in the field, it makes so much more sense. And there is the old adage: the best geologist is the person who's seen the most rocks. And just the more time you're in a place seeing things, and I think that's what you're asking me. It really, and seeing the sort of environment being so alive in Iceland, it then allows you to kind of apply it to older rocks you see in other parts of the world, and sort of imagine what it would have been like, because you can picture what Iceland's like today.
I completely agree with that, James, because when I was working for the geopark in Shetland, and I would go to various meetings in Europe and visit other geoparks, and we'd get taken on field trips. And I guess because Shetland has such a diverse geology and it covers a lot of ground, so a lot of the things that you'll see in other places, you can go, oh yeah, that's what we've got that in Shetland as well. And so it really was the case that I would see something in another place that looked a bit familiar, and I'd think, oh, I wonder if that's such and such, and then the guide would come along and say, oh, and this is whatever, and I'd be like, ah, it was totally right, because you see it in the field and you can sort of make that connection.
Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'll wait one moment in case somebody does. But if not, just to say thank you very much, James. That was absolutely fascinating tour of Iceland. It sort of wets the whistle to want to go there. I have a question though from my partner, who is not very mobile. If you were just to drive around, would you get some benefit that you obviously get more of if you're able to walk?
Yeah, I think you definitely get benefit just driving around, because you can see so much out of the window. So many things are kind of near to where the car stops. You wouldn't be able to see everything, but it would certainly be better than not going. So I think it's not a waste.
Right, thank you for that. Anyway, so thank you very much, and we'll call a halt to the evening if that's all right.
Okay, and thank you everyone, and I'll see you, Alan, in a couple of weeks' time in Oman.
We'll catch up with you on the Zoom call next week, and then
Oh yes, yeah,
look forward to a bit of heat and sunshine for the day.
yeah, some heat and sunshine, and some longer daylight.
Well,
I'm
that's true.
so envious of that. I was just thinking before we knock off, Stephen, what's our next talk? Is it Rob Holdsworth?
It's Bolesworth on the 15th of February, I think it is.
Mhm.
Day after
Valentine's Day.
sorry, Valentine's Day is the one I'm looking for. And there's a meeting of our geological book club on the 29th, I think, of January.
Yeah. So lots more coming up.
Okay.
Okie dokie.
All
Right,
right.
we'll say good night.
Yep, I will shut it down now. So have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Okay.
Bye now.
Goodbye.
Many thanks. Bye bye.